So to my knowledge, we've not had a presentation in the past on addressing abuse and harassment. And we've had for a couple, 2-3 years, a youth protection officer that primarily worked on youth protection issues for youth exchange. But Rotary has a youth protection guide that lays out a lot of guidelines for Rotary districts to ensure that they provide a safe environment for young people. And in the past couple of years, we've learned that it's really important that club presidents understand not just youth protection and what they would do if it were reported to them, but also under the Rotary Code of Conduct, there's information that says that it's the district's responsibility to help clubs develop a abuse and harassment policy. So this is kind of a dry run that Chaz and I are putting together to make available to club presidents. And there's a resolution that'll be coming with the packet for the business meeting for the district. And the resolution is basically saying that all club presidents in the first half of their year shall devote one club meeting to doing a presentation to all of their club members about the issues of abuse and harassment. Now, there is a couple of different courses in the Rotary Learning Center, and much of the content for this slide presentation has been taken from that. But if we would ask 1,700 members to go to the Learning Center and take this, it's probably not the most efficient way of getting this information in front of clubs. So by asking clubs to devote one club meeting, the purpose would be the majority of the clubs would have heard it and know what it is and why it's important and what to do. So much of the content of this is going to walk you through that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So for this session, we want you to know what Rotary's policy on harassment is. Our best hope is that you will develop a greater awareness and understanding of abuse and harassment, and we're going to provide you some examples. You will know as a Rotarian or a club leader the steps for creating a harassment-free environment, and you'll know what to do if you're harassed as a member to report it to your club. And then you would know how to respond to the allegations of harassment if it were reported to you as a club leader. And then finally, a little bit of talk about establishing a review committee. So I wanted to start by kind of checking for understanding. So we're going to present to you just 5 brief scenarios, and then we'll give you 3 choices of an answer. So the first scenario, a female member of a club tells you that her club president, or you, the club president, that she was inappropriately touched by a man at a club event. She doesn't want to tell the board or the local authorities. What's the best response if you were a club leader? Would you tell the man you want to hear the presentation? Oops, that's not the right one. Oh boy. Would you thank her for confiding in you and asking what she hopes will be the result? Will you respect her decision not to tell anyone else? Would you tell her that Rotary has no tolerance for harassing behaviors, strongly advise her to talk to the local authorities, and let her know that you would like to conduct an investigation so that it doesn't happen again? Of those 3 choices, what do you think the correct answer is? So you can just write this down and use it as A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to go on to the next one. All right, scenario number 2. A male member reports to you, a club president, that he was disrespected and publicly defamed by another member at a local Rotary event that you did not attend. He asked that this person be disciplined. What would be your next step? 1 would be tell him that because you weren't there, you can't resolve the situation. Or say that you will investigate and ask him to document the details, including the names of anyone else who witnessed the incident. Or would you assure him that you will talk to the other person and tell them that such behavior isn't appropriate. Which of those three would you think is the correct response? Okay, moving on to number 3. Your club invites a female member from another club to talk about a project. And while she's speaking, a male club member makes derogatory comments and dismisses the ideas she's presenting. The club president asks him to be quiet, but he continues to mumble at his seat and disturb other members. The guest feels uncomfortable and ends her presentation early. As one of the 3 men at the table with the man making the derogatory comments, what is your response? So I think this was yeah, okay, here it is. Tell the man that you want to hear the presentation and that all the speakers deserve respect. Ask him to leave if he doesn't want to hear the presenter. Or you could do nothing. It's the club president's job to manage this type of behavior. Or you could approach the man after the presentation and say that his behavior was disruptive and unfair to the presenter. Ask what his complaint about the presentation was and how he could have handled it differently. Of those 3 choices, what would you do? Okay. Number 4. A club member who belongs to the dominant ethnic group votes against admitting the first member from an underrepresented ethnic group, saying the prospective member isn't welcome and threatening to leave the club if the man is admitted. At the next club meeting, which the new member attends, the longtime member won't shake the new member's hand, refuses to speak to him, and starts talking to a friend about how the club's image has suffered since it started to let them into the club. When the new member speaks, the longtime member makes negative comments. As a member of this club, what would you do? Would you talk to the club president and say you feel that the longtime member is creating a hostile environment? Would you tell the longtime member that his comments are inappropriate and that you support having the new member as part of your club? Would you do nothing? It is the responsibility of the club leaders or the board to intervene. What would you do? In the last scenario, you investigate an allegation of harassment and determine that the club president sexually harassed another member of your club. Criminal charges are filed with the local authorities. What should your club do now? Wait and see how the court case is resolved, then determine a course of action. Terminate the person's membership and all participation in Rotary activities, or suspend the person's participation in youth activities and ask that they don't attend club meetings or events. So we're going to come back later and give you the correct answer. And what we wanted to do was just help you understand what are examples of harassment. And again, we'll make this slide presentation available to anybody that would like it, and as well as the recording. And I don't want to read every one of these to you, but harassment can take many forms. And when the behavior becomes pervasive or extreme, it's harassment. So for example, making unsolicited comments about a person's attractive or appearance may be harassment. Leering or whistling, using, displaying, or sharing sexually suggestive or offensive words, objects, pictures, articles, letters, emails, texts, or websites. Making references to age, ethnicity, race, color, abilities, religion, socioeconomic status, culture, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. And I'm not going to read all the others to you. It's too broad. But when someone is experiencing harassment, they have this sense that it's unwelcoming, it's unwarranted, it makes you uncomfortable, and most of these speak to those kind of situations. So why is this all important to us? The Rotary Code of Conduct in particular says, as a Rotarian, I will, and if you look down, number 4 is avoid behavior that reflects adversely on Rotary or other Rotarians. And number 5 is help maintain a harassment-free environment in Rotary meetings, events, and activities. And report any suspected harassment and help ensure non-retaliation to those individuals that report harassment. The first 3 are certainly relevant, but it's the last 2 is why we want to make sure that clubs understand their responsibility. So the Rotary Code of Conduct is something that when we join Rotary, most of us receive an orientation and we get a packet, and this is probably included with it. But beyond that, I don't know the extent that clubs remind their members of what the Code of Conduct is, and is probably something that's good to share from time to time. Also, the Rotary Code of Policies makes it the responsibility of the district to help clubs develop their policy on this. So the first area is Rotary is committed to maintaining an environment that is free of harassment. And the second, harassment is broadly defined as any conduct, verbal or physical, that denigrates, insults, or offends a person or group based on any characteristic. And I read them previously, so I'm not going to read those again. So that is the Rotary Code of Policies, and we have a Rotary Code of Conduct. And as clubs, therefore, the district has a responsibility to ensure that every club creates a safe environment, free of harassment. So as District 5010, as district leaders, it includes the governor, assistant governors, committee chairs, and they're encouraged to work with their clubs to create a harassment-free environment. If it were a situation where you were attending a zone meeting, for example, or a district conference, then it would be the leaders in that district that are putting on the district conference, or the leaders who are putting on the zone conference. And similarly, if it's the Rotary International Conference, it would be the responsibility of the Rotary International leaders and the people putting on a conference. So district leaders should also work with their clubs to establish a code of conduct and policies for how to address and prevent harassment within their clubs, among their members, and with other participants in Rotary. To my knowledge, I don't know that we've ever had a formal policy for the district. I suspect that clubs work very hard to create a safe environment that's free of harassment, but the resolution to have clubs devote one club meeting or a club assembly in the first half of their year is intended to try to make this a part of the culture of all of our clubs so that they understand their responsibilities. So all members and individuals attending or participating in Rotary meetings, events, or activities should expect an environment free of harassment, and it's their responsibility to help maintain an environment that promotes safety, courtesy, dignity, and respect for all. At the club level, allegations of harassment at Rotary meetings, events, or activities shall be reviewed by the club board and responded to within a reasonable time frame, typically 1 month. So if you were the club president or you were a member of the board of your club and it was reported that someone had a complaint about a member or something that happened at a meeting, the board can take a reasonable amount of time, but usually it may be a committee of the board, but it shouldn't be one person. And if the alleged offender is a member of the club board, he or she must recuse themselves or himself or herself from the discussion. The review and investigation shall be dependent on the circumstances, including the severity and pervasiveness of the behavior. And concerns that allegations of harassment were not adequately addressed by the club may be referred with appropriate documentation to the district governor. I can tell you that once this year it was brought to my attention about an issue, and I appreciated that the club president took the time to call me, told me how it was handled at the club level, And I was satisfied at the time that the situation had been handled properly, and I told them so. But as a district governor, when clubs have this in place, rather than ignore it or think that they've handled it, I think it's important that they report it so that we don't get blindsided about something that may be happening at a club level. It's also important that Rotarians know what to do if they are harassed. So first off, if your safety is in doubt, contact local enforcement, law enforcement. All allegations of criminal behavior should be reported to law enforcement officials. Tell someone on the club's board. If the behavior took place at a Rotary event, notify the appropriate person based on where the event occurred. So we're going to be transitioning here a little bit. Adults who work with youth are subject to the policies outlined in the Rotary Code of Policies. All allegations of criminal activity should be referred to appropriate local law enforcement authorities. In Alaska, we're considered a mandatory reporting. This is what mandatory reporting means, that if you see something or know of something, reporting it to someone else does not mean that you've gone far enough. You have an obligation to report it to law enforcement, or you report it to children's services if it involves maybe a host parent. But knowing the difference, this is something that all of our youth exchange officers at our club level and our presidents are vetted to make sure that they understand what they're supposed to do. But most club members, rank and file, often don't know what their responsibilities are. So the club board shall promptly address allegations of harassment and shall not retaliate against those making any allegation. So here's some steps for addressing an allegation. Take all allegations of harassment seriously and address the situation. The club board must promptly address any allegation and must not retaliate against the person who made it. Rotary strongly encourages clubs to form committees to address these kinds of allegations. The district should work with their clubs to establish a code of conduct and policies for preventing and addressing harassment within clubs, among members, and with other Rotary participants. These policies should list the consequences if harassment is found, but does not constitute criminal activity. And they should specify when contact with young people should be restricted. So it's possible that a member of your club, while being investigated, is also involved in a youth program or a youth event that you have. They may be barred from having any contact with young people until their investigation has been completed. And if the harassment is pervasive or criminal, then the club can take action against them, and we'll get back to that in a few minutes. So if sexual harassment is found, contact with youth is prohibited. And we're going to let Chaz address that a little more directly. So when it's known or suspected that criminal behavior is involved, all allegations of criminal behavior must be referred to local law enforcement officials. Members should always cooperate fully with any investigation and should not interfere. So once it's reported to law enforcement, the individual that reports them should not talk about it because there's an active investigation going. Nobody who was directly involved in an incident or behavior that is reported should participate in investigating it or making decisions about it, nor should their friends. So this is a very quick introduction, and now that you're familiar with Rotary's policy, your club can work to make sure that your meetings and other events are harassment-free. You can tell all members about the policy. That's another reason why we want this to be done annually. You can create a committee or institute a process for handling allegations, and the district leadership can help clubs do that. And you can make it clear to members that you will listen to all concerns. Creating a harassment-free environment is the responsibility of everyone in the club. And think about what else you can do to create an atmosphere where all people are respected. So that's the conclusion of my portion of the presentation. And what I want to do right now is I want to go back to the scenarios that we read earlier. So just give me a second and I'll slide back up here. So in scenario number 1, this was the female member that tells her club president she was inappropriately touched by a man at a club event. So how many of you chose, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Let me just give you the correct answer, and that'll save everybody having to blurt out. If you chose C, that is the best answer. And while you can't force this individual to talk, you should respect her decision and make sure to provide her with clear options and support so she can make the most informed decision. Now, keep in mind that when I took this same quiz, I didn't get 100%. So some of these are pretty tricky, but this is the correct answer that's identified in the course in the Learning Center. Let's look at scenario.
Can you show the answers again as you did this?
I'm sorry?
Could you possibly show the 3 choices again as you did the answer?
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Oh, wait. So the 3 choices were thanking her for confiding in you and asking what she hopes will be the result, respecting her decision not to tell anyone, and the correct answer was C, tell her that Rotary has no tolerance for harassing behaviors. Strongly advise her to talk to local authorities and let her know you would like to conduct an investigation so this does not happen again.
Okay. Can I ask a question there, Andre? Can you hear me? It's Michelle.
Yes, I can.
The only question I have is because that would be an illegal act, I think, if it were to be proven out. I just might be getting mixed up with some of my youth training that we are not to investigate because that can muddy waters, and to let the professionals investigate. In the case of youth, it would be the right people. I don't know. So
you're correct. When it involves youth, you don't conduct the investigation. You try to remove the student from the situation.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, you try to remove the individual that's doing the harassing behavior, and you provide support for the young person. And there's a whole lot of protocols that Chaz can speak to better than I can.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. That's a good question. Okay, scenario number 2, a male member reports to you, a club president, that he was disrespected and publicly defamed by another member at a local Rotary event that you did not attend. He asked that this person be disciplined. So of the 3 choices, tell him because you weren't there, you can't resolve the situation. Say that you will investigate and ask him to document the details, including the names of anyone else who witnessed the incident, or you assure him that you will talk to the other person and tell them that such behavior isn't appropriate. And the correct response is B. You say that you'll investigate, you ask him to document, and you include the names of anyone else who witnessed, because you would be talking with them as part of the investigation. Scenario number 3, your club invites a female member from another club to talk about a project. And I'm not going to read through all of it, but the 3 choices were thank her for confiding in you. And no, I think this is the one that we got them backwards. Okay, I'm trying to find the correct response here because one of them was out of order. Let me come back to that one. I'm sorry. Let's go to number 4. Chaz, maybe you can look at my slides there and tell me which the correct one is. All right, so scenario number 4, a club member who belongs to the dominant ethnic group votes against admitting the first member from an underrepresented ethnic group. That was the situation. And of the 3 choices, you can talk to the club president and say you feel that the longtime member is creating a hostile environment. You can tell the longtime member that his comments are inappropriate and that you support having the new member as part of the club. Or you could do nothing. It is the responsibility of the club's leaders or the board to intervene. The correct answer for scenario number 4 is B. tell the longtime member that his comments are inappropriate and that you support having the new member as part of your club. And then the final one here, you investigate an allegation of harassment and determine that the club president sexually harassed another member of your club. Criminal charges are filed with local authorities. What should your club do now? And the choices were wait to see how the court case is resolved and determine a course of action. Terminate the person's membership and all participation in Rotary activities, and suspend the person's participation in youth activities and ask that they don't attend club meetings or events. And the correct response there is B, terminate the person's membership and all participation in youth activities. So that one stumped me, and when I took the case, I thought it was A, but it's B. So this is why I think it's really important that our clubs understand and are aware of not only what harassment is, but how to respond, and then finally how to investigate and what their options are. And you don't need to go this alone as a club. If you conduct an investigation and you're not really sure, you can certainly consult with the district, who may be able to confide in you, a couple of other people that can assist you in making that determination. But if it crosses that line where it's criminal, or if it crosses that line where it's pervasive harassment, it's better to let the law enforcement determine whether charges will be brought or not. But the investigation that you make may reveal what the best course of action is. But I think that this is something that we do deal with in our work. I know I had to go through annual training when I was a school principal, and of course I was dealing with kids, so it's a little bit different. But if you've got a large organization that you're working with, you've received probably very similar training. But when you're a Rotary Club president and you're on a member of the board of the club, and this comes to your attention, are you going to know what to do? And I think it's probably something that's long overdue. So with that,
may I ask a question?
Yes, I was going to take a couple of questions unless it involved youth, in which case I was going to suggest you wait and ask.
No, it's not about youth. This was on your last scenario where the club president was accused of something. Now, does that mean that we're going to, okay, an allegation. Club president sexually harassed another member. And the response was pretty much eject him from the club simply on the allegation. I don't quite follow the reasoning there. If the charge has not been proven.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the code of conduct, which I think is probably the most relevant thing here. They're removed because they've violated the code of conduct, and the response there that's given by the learning center is what I'm going from, and it's not altogether different than the guidance that's given by RI when our youth exchange officers and president are vetted to be able to work with young people. So that's the response that they've given. I think that if your club was unsure about choosing A, B, or C, that you'd want to talk with a district leader who could certainly verify that with Rotary International. But as far as I can tell right now, that is the guidance it's given.
Well, once again, that has nothing to do with youth. I'm talking club members. A club member alleges that the president did something, and you're saying exclude that president from the club and all activities before there's any kind of a criminal investigation done.
Well, it's assumed that the club is doing an investigation, and they've talked to witnesses, and they're basing the criminal, referring it to law enforcement based on that investigation. And it's presumed that there's more than one individual that's determining that, yes, this in fact did happen.
Okay, so this does follow an actual investigation, not simply an allegation.
Yeah, the allegation would lead you as a club leader to pull together a committee that would look at this. You would ask for written information. You would interview witnesses, and did as it was reported to you, did your investigation reveal that that was the case? So there would be a determination made by your club investigation, and you would base referring it for law enforcement on the results of your investigation. They may want to interview further. They may not choose to file charges. But as far as the club goes, do you want members in your club who there were witnesses and it's based on the report that this in fact happened, whether it's criminal or not? So
thanks for the clarification. I was thinking, oh boy, here's an easy way for me to get out of being president.
Andre?
Yes.
I have to agree with the last questioner. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but the way the question was worded to me, it didn't say that there was an investigation that had transpired first. It sounded like the initial action before any investigation was done. So maybe the question needs to be a little bit better written, but my first reaction was that there was that would have been an overreaction without an investigation.
The first sentence says, you investigate an allegation of harassment and determine that the club has been sexually harassed.
Okay, thank you.
But it is easy to be a little confused about that. And I'm really glad Alan asked that question because it gave me an opportunity to clarify. You would not refer for law enforcement. And number one, the club can't make criminal charges. You can say, based on our investigation, we believe this is a law enforcement matter. Okay, so I'd like to move on and allow Chaz to go ahead and give his brief presentation, and then we'll continue to take any questions at the end. But you can all see why this is something that I think that we need to make sure that our clubs and our members fully understand. So Rosie, can you switch over now and make Chaz the presenter?
Okay, he's already co-host. So what you want to do is unshare your screen and he shares his screen.
All right, new share.
You just go up to the very top where the green thing is.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. You have, or down at the bottom.
Well, mine's showing at the top, but it's saying stop share.
Yeah, stop share.
Okay, there we go.
There you go. Now Chaz will share his screen.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And Andre, thank you very much for your part of the presentation. It's really exciting to see that the district is moving forward in a proactive way, especially when it comes to protecting all Rotarians, their children, and all of our different Rotary programs where we include youth. I'd like to start out by saying that in February, things changed dramatically around the world and very quickly with the onset of COVID. And when I look back at where we were in May, when last May, when I first started presenting on harassment and on what's going on with District 5010, it dawned on me that a lot has changed. I noticed, Rick, you're participating in this. I know you have a son that was, I believe, in Thailand, and this was all happening around you and your family. There are a number of families that were affected by what took place. And I think it's really important for us to take a look at where we are what we do as Rotarians. And my first slide sort of, it addresses this in a way that hopefully you can all relate to.
Hey, Chaz, you
yes.
need to share your screen so we can see your slides.
Oh, I don't know how that happened. Hold on. Okay, let me see here. Now I got all kinds of things going on here now. Let me get back in here. Sorry about that, you guys.
That's
Is
okay.
that better?
That was a great beginning. No,
Well,
do you have your presentation up in your screen on your computer?
I do. Yeah,
okay.
I do.
Okay, go to the
And
bottom and hit the green thing that says share screen.
I did. I have done that. Yep, I did. And I don't have anything up here except that I see, I believe what I see is other kinds of decks, but.
Okay, hang on for a minute. Maybe I have it. Oh, do you have it? Oh, wait a minute.
Is this it? Will this work?
It says host has disabled screen sharing. Oh, but that shouldn't be for him. Okay.
This is
nope.
Chaz. It says District 5010 Youth Protection. Is that it?
Yes, it does. Yep.
Oh, okay. So, all right.
All right. So we're on the move. Okay. Yeah. Good deal. All right. First of all, let me get back to this first slide. This is our manifest basically for youth protection, that we strive to create and maintain a safe environment for all youth to participate in Rotary activities to the best of our ability. Rotarians, Rotarian spouses and partners and other volunteers must safeguard the children and young people that come into contact with and protect them from physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. And part of what I'm most excited about, especially transitioning from last year to this year, is working again with Jeff and Cheryl and Boyd on the youth exchange end. I'm looking forward to working with Layral, with Interact, and actually having a better communication with all of our Rotarians in clubs around District 5010, just in terms of how we could better create a more continuum of safety and care for our youth. I want to get into part of what we're trying to do right now is have every club be more engaged in who's selected for youth volunteers, and make sure that every club has a responsibility. Our YEOs and our presidents have the responsibility to look for people who meet what they believe are the right criteria to become youth volunteers, and make sure that they go through the RI Youth Protection Guide, which is very important. I would also like to say that we need to thoroughly and regularly evaluate the suitability of adults who have, for some reason I have this one. Let me see if I can do so. Oh, I just did it. Thanks. I couldn't see everything, so now I can see clearly, which I think is the name of a song from a long time ago. So moving forward, making sure that we have the ability to evaluate the suitability of adults who have significant unsupervised contact with youth, including Rotarians, family members, and other non-Rotarians. This is a pretty big net that we're trying to reach out there with, and to ensure that a system of volunteer participant screening and selection is in place. And that's where the code of ethics and our conduct and the resolution that Andre referred to are really big steps forward. 5010 is working toward adopting a district policy and procedures that will help to hopefully keep us all more aligned with what our responsibilities are. And that's a simple outcome that we all need to to look at. We're not sure what's going to happen. I mean, I'm not aware of any real thought processes that have taken place at this time to deal with COVID, to deal with the the uncertainty of families wanting to send their children out to another country to engage in a cultural exchange like ours does, and vice versa. And so we're going to have to all come together and look for ways that help all of us navigate through this new, very uncertain environment that we're in. The ecosystem that we used to be in when it came to our youth and Rotary has changed and may change forever. But I firmly believe that when these kinds of incidences occur and disruptions occur in our society, we have the opportunity to look for greater opportunities to make what we do and how we do it even better. One of the key factors for us is all the training that's already been designed and has evolved through Rotary International. You know, the Rotary Learning Center is a great place to go to get all kinds of information. And they have a wonderful course that tells you all about, some of the things that Andre brought up, some of the examples he brought up. They have a plethora of examples. You have the opportunity to hone in on what and open your mind to what really does constitute harassment and abuse. And then, you have a much greater opportunity to share that with your fellow Rotarians. Completing a background check that includes all youth program chairs and any adult volunteer is likely to have responsibility for a youth in a supervised situation is part of the criteria. That's what needs to happen. And District 5010 has a commitment to all Rotary youth through our own collaboration. And this is something that I think maybe some folks haven't. I've seen it at the district level where YEOs and where presidents are getting together with the district, and they're looking for ways to not only make sure that there are conversations about how we can provide important information to our Rotarians and the children that we're here to protect. Understanding and implementing reporting protocols is a big part of that process as well. And it's something that Andre touched on earlier. We have a very clear, concise commitment to make sure that if there's any inappropriate behavior that occurs, whether with an adult or another child, I mean, you've got protocols, and it's an immediate process. You report it, and then whoever you report it to, whether it's your YEO or your president, they have an immediate accountability to take the next step. And
Jeff,
and that's yes.
I just wanted to ask if you could just take a moment to talk about the volunteer form that all volunteers should complete. And we have some youth activities and positions that require not only abuse and harassment awareness training, but they also require vetting. But not every Rotarian working with youth at a youth event requires vetting. Could you describe those two things, the volunteer form and the vetting?
I've got the volunteer form. I've got access to it here real quick. Let me see if I can find that, and maybe we can just go over it together, because there are some interesting dynamics. Let me see if I can get out of this and go right into here. Youth protection incident form. That's something everybody's familiar with, right?
In youth exchange.
Yes. Oh, everybody in youth exchange. My apologies.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, it's also part of the crisis management package that'll go out to every president in this coming year, and as it has in years past. It's already
That's
there
super.
with Rotary's guidelines attached.
You know, my apologies, Andre. I don't have that up in my batch here for the volunteer form.
So do you want to speak to it or you want me to?
Go ahead and speak to it. Let me see if I can find it.
Basically, somebody is going to be helping out at Layral or helping out with Interact or helping out at some kind of a youth activity. If they're in a position where they're likely to be unsupervised with a child by themselves, they require a higher degree of vetting. So everyone else is required to take the abuse and harassment awareness training, and they complete a volunteer form. And the volunteer form simply says, I have never been charged with a criminal offense working with children. If somebody were a Rotarian and they had been, hopefully they aren't in Rotary, but it would cause them to pause and think, if I put my name on this document and I'm found out, then I'm going to have a big problem. But it's a measure of protection for the district because it's one piece of screening a volunteer. And it's in the Youth Protection Guide as an example, and we've not been using it, and we should be.
Okay, is this it that I have up here right now?
Yes.
Can everybody see that?
It's towards the
Right.
back.
It's at the bottom here. It says, I understand that District 5010 Rotary will deny a volunteer position to anyone convicted of a crime of violence, sexual abuse or harassment, or any other crime of sexual nature, and may deny a volunteer position to anyone who has been charged with those crimes. So these crimes, it's fairly succinct in how it's brought together, and you have to swear that you're that the information you've provided is the truth. So, yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
The vetting's a whole nother thing that's run through Youth Exchange, and I don't know that we need to get in a lot of detail about that, except that certain committee chairs working with youth have to mandatorily take it. All of our host families, all of our volunteers in Youth Exchange have that higher level of vetting.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Andre. I'd like to go on because we're almost out of time here, and I understand that everybody's had a really long day. And one of the things that is really important is that we all understand what our commitment is through collaboration. And part of this is an onboarding strategy that we can put together for all new Rotarians in each one of our clubs that onboard. A big part of what Andre's put together here and what we're putting together with our youth exchange, and not just them, but our Layral, our Interact folks, and our clubs when every club is going to have the opportunity to actually sit down together in the first half of the year and address this as a group, it'll be clear to us how important it is that we make sure every new club member that comes on board has their own toolkit in place so that they too understand the process and will be required to go through the same kind of information that they might have missed. Another thing that I think is really clearly important for us is to take a look at, especially in today's world, breaking down barriers and duplicity by combining best practices that are already in place in Layral, Interact, Youth Exchange, and other club functions involving youth. We have some really bright people over the years have put together some fantastic thought processes about what's in the best interest of our children and how do we protect them, taking the best of all these different procedures and putting them together in one place so that everybody has an understanding of what their accountabilities are to our youth is, in my opinion, a great way for us to move forward. And hoping that we can plow some ground in 2020, 2021 in order to make that happen. Because as we grow into this new environment we're getting ready to go into, it's critical that we're thinking about, you know, what is in the best interest of our youth. And I'll end with that. And once again, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Chaz. And we can take any questions that are in the chat room. I can't see them all, Rosie. So if you've got some that you'd like either of us to address.
Yes. Okay, so Joe Cash, I said the Nyan Rotary Youth Exchange volunteer training module is very good and easy to follow.
Right.
It's problematic though, because it requires that we work through Boyd, who's a area coordinator, and the names have to be inputted of all your volunteers, and then they send out a link, and it doesn't work with Mac computers, it works with IBM. I tend to lean more towards the same course that's offered in the Learning Center, because when they complete it, they can print out their certificate right away.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't involve any additional time by the youth exchange staff. It's not really the responsibility of the youth exchange program to be handling all of the people that take that Nyan course. So this is something I think we need to have a conversation with youth exchange and our district leaders, Joe, because I think it needs to be resolved.
Hang on, Andre. Sorry, it took me some time to unmute and all that. Yeah, I agree with that. And maybe we could just schedule a meeting in, sometime before the middle of June or some such.
Yeah,
Sure.
I just need to walk through that, because we're asking an awful lot of already overloaded youth exchange personnel to take on something that's about other youth programs.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an alternative available that's less time intensive and doesn't require their help.
Well, I haven't really asked them to do anything yet in any of that regards, but we're going to obviously have to deal with all these issues with things like RILA. I quite concur about that.
So we have another question from Kenny Solomon Gross. Do all PEs have to take this training?
Well, if they've got youth exchange, they're already required to train, but it's the Nyan training. If they don't have youth exchange, but they have Interact, then the president, it would behoove us to require it of all the presidents. So part of the resolution is saying that the president is responsible for ensuring that they offer training to their club in a club meeting or assembly using these materials. And so this slide deck that the two of us is sharing, we'll continue to refine that so clubs can have a presentation. And of course, if a member isn't there when the club does the presentation, they still have the option of taking it through the Learning Center. So
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
All right, another one. George, you have a question on offensive behavior.
Yes, I do, if I could. This is for the first presenter. I realize, and I understand exactly what we're trying to do, and I fully support it, but the use of the term offensive behavior is, in the course of my lifetime, has rapidly changed what's offensive and what's not. There are people now that are offended by the flying of the flag. They're offended by an invocation. They're offended by all sorts of things. And is there any way we can clarify that so that we don't have constant battle with someone being offended and having to investigate that?
That's a really good question. And my initial response is that offensive behavior as a one-time thing could be very much something that is interpreted very differently by the one that was offensive versus the one receiving the offensive comment or actions. So it really has to do with degrees and pervasiveness. So if you're uncomfortable, you should say something to somebody, and it needs to be resolved. And I think that that's why you want to have a committee. Once it's reported, they look at it and they determine, is this offensive behavior to the extent that it's criminal? If it's offensive behavior, you talk to someone and say, when you did this, it made me feel very uncomfortable and I don't want it to happen again. You know, so I think that that's really up to the people doing the investigation for the club that would have to determine, you know, what they're.
This is Joe. Let me throw a thought out. Most behavior that's considered offensive by somebody isn't criminal, and sometimes it might not even be, might not even be offensive to most people. There are a couple of thoughts. I think that we have to be, obviously you be sensible and have to kind of put the reasonable person standard to it. And we also have to think of the fact it's not just criminal, but the fact that we could really lose club membership and offend people. I mean, club membership, by the way, so we have to use some common sense. In cases like this, the Alaska Supreme Court, for example, has explicitly adopted what they call the rule of common sense. In other words, we basically have to look at mores, at just reasonableness. There's no hard and fast rule because, as you note, all kinds of people are offended across the spectrum by something. We just have to, I think we should look at A, is it criminal or not? And B, does it offend a lot of members? Is it unreasonable? Is it going to, adversely affect the club? Those sorts of things. And so we can't give a single pat answer. You just got to have to use some sense under the facts of the current situation, in my opinion.
Great, thanks. That helps. And I do have one other comment just to make on the subject on the question that was wondered why the president was eliminated from the club and banned from meetings. There was a very similar incident in one of the clubs I attend down here in Texas, where someone had done something and was under investigation and looking at criminal activity. And it was the fact that the club did not want the public image of Rotary to be smeared across the paperwork. The individual went through his investigation, did the criminal, went to court, was found not guilty, everything was fine. Then he was allowed to come back in. But while he was under the eye of the public and the impact it may have on Rotary, that's the reason that he was no longer allowed at the meetings.
Yeah, and I can tell you, if they're a Rotarian and it involves youth, RI will require that they have no contact with youth and that they be barred from attending meetings until the investigation is closed. So that's something that every DG does not want to get one of those emails from Rotary International.
Yeah, and if it involves youth and it goes criminal, you are required to terminate their membership forever in that club and report it to RI. So I should say criminal conviction. So RI really does have a zero tolerance policy, and they've just made that very clearly known. So if you run into an issue like that in the coming year, please let us know right away, to Chaz, to me, or any of the other DG people. And what we'll probably do right away is just refer it out to another attorney, like one of our retired judges, and ask for the judge's initial advice on how to proceed. In the meantime, don't go and start, grilling witnesses, because that tends to, as I think it was Andre said before, muddy the water pretty badly.
Well, thank you everybody for participating in our session. And if you've got any kind of follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to follow up with us. Rosie will make the slide decks available. They still need some cleaning up before we have them used by presidents this fall. But I want to thank Chaz for the work that he does with youth protection.
Thank you very much, Andre.